Hello, everybody. We're just a couple of minutes behind time, so I'm going to start the meeting now. Welcome, everybody. The first item on the agenda is apologies for absence. Do we have any?
There's been no apologies for absence.
Now, the next item on the agenda is we call Public Open Forum, in which members of the public are invited if they want to ask questions from the Audit Committee. We do have a member of the public here, Mr. Rees, sitting at the back. I'll just make a little comment about these microphones. For the streaming system to work, the speaker has to press the button to make their microphone work, and that means everybody can hear what's going on. So, Mr. Rees, I understand you have a question. I think what I'm going to do is invite you down here so that you can ask your question on one of these microphones. Okay, now before you speak, you need to just press the button that's on the microphone in front of you. And could you also introduce yourself, please?
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to put this question. The name is Mike Rees. I taught at Chepstow School from 1973 to 2009. In her submission to the committee on the 18th of June, the head teacher at Chepstow School commented on an interest-free loan given to a teacher to assist with relocation, stated, "We didn't set up a sufficiently timely repayment of that loan." In a reply to the Freedom of Information request about this loan worded, "How much was the 2-year interest-free relocation loan to a member of staff at Chepstow School without a repayment plan?" the response took advantage of the wording and stated, "No relocation loan was given to a member of staff that meets this description." In the light of this somewhat flippant response to a serious matter, the management of public funds, will this committee be taking a closer look at the management of Chepstow's devolved budget, particularly regarding 4 issues? 1. Teacher recruitment continuing to take place alongside voluntary redundancy occurring, even though budget forecasts should have indicated a mounting deficit. 2. The cost of the decision to increase the size of the school's management tier, but not to appoint a bursar to provide financial expertise. 3. The cost of appointing a private HR firm to assist in the implementation of compulsory redundancies. 4. The cost of the decision to dismiss a senior employee, particularly as there was subsequently a settlement in order to avoid an employment tribunal, and the school then failed to present a convincing case for its claims against the teacher to a professional conduct and competency committee of the GTCW, and I misled you, there are 5. The cost of a loosely regulated interest-free loan to a teacher at the same time as the school was heading towards a £250,000 deficit. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, well, that's your question. The only person here, I think, who may be able to make a contribution at this stage would be Mr. Howcroft, who's from our finance team. Do you have anything you want to say at the moment?
No, I'll happily take those questions and provide a response through the Audit Committee if you like. I mean, I am aware of some of the situations, but not fully versed to be able to speak authoritatively about all 5 aspects. So I'd like time to actually just have a look at that and do a bit more digging.
I think it's reasonable for you to look into it and then perhaps let me know what you find out, and then we'll decide what we're going to pass on what we found out. We had a contribution from here.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm Kelly Byrne, Chief Officer for Enterprise. I'm responsible for HR. That's one of my functions. And I just wanted to say that in response to some of those questions raised, I believe that they have been raised with the leader of the council. He has agreed to investigate and to look into some of those claims. And I believe that process is ongoing. So it might be wise, once that process is finished and finalised, for those findings to perhaps be shared here appropriately, and that discussion to be had one stage further on.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This committee picked up some concerns on a report from the auditor regarding this matter in April. We asked the representatives of the school to come to meet us. They met us at the last meeting. Following that meeting, the minutes of that particular meeting said that the auditors would come back to us with a further update. Where do you see, as officers and auditors, put in these questions into context in the way that we had the presentation last month? Because as a subsequent meeting of council, certain figures are mentioned on redundancy costs. Are these matters going to be pulled together as a concise report for this committee to consider, maybe under pink papers or something? But it can't keep bouncing back and forward. There must be a true resolution somewhere so that the audit committee, which picked this up initially, I think, other than things outside, to really satisfy the committee.
Well, I think we'll note your comments, Councillor Rees, and what we're really dealing with just at the moment is making an appropriate response to Mr. Rees, which I think we've had an immediate response. Yes, Councillor.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I can confirm that what Councillor Eason is asking for is what is in process. So I would be quite certain that by the time we get to the next meeting, we'll have all of the responses that have been requested here this afternoon.
Thank you very much. Yes, Councillor Petrini, quickly, I'd like to move on.
Just a level of reassurance, Chairman. Will we be undertaking a broader analysis of whether head teachers regularly across the county do this sort of employment of loans without going through proper process and policy?
Again, I don't see that that's something we should be discussing
Chair,
on this
that would be
item.
for Andrew and his team to check. I certainly wouldn't be able to answer that with any certainty, but I'm quite certain that the audit team can pick it up.
Okay, Kelly.
Thank you, Chairman. I think the first answer needs to be, well, we don't know that's the case as yet. We've got to go through that process to establish if that is actually the case. And then those findings, as Councillor Murphy described, can be shared in this forum. But just because it happens or may have happened in one context doesn't mean that that's replicated across the board. So I'd air a note of caution there. But I think, as Councillor Murphy has said, if there is a comprehensive report in response to these claims that have been made previously and in writing, then that can be shared in the appropriate manner here, and perhaps next steps can then be debated at that point.
Thank you. Right, I'm taking it that we've covered that item then. If the result is a further paper to the Audit Committee, that will be public property, but we will discuss anyway what Mr. Howcroft finds out. Thank you. Oh, well, the next item on the agenda then is declarations of interest. We usually take these as we go along, but got a couple of hands up here.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. It's on page 92. It's in relation to the end of year school balances. I happen to be a governor of a particular school, which is Durand Primary. I'm declaring that interest. It's just personal only, because I'm the governor of that school, and I have filled in the appropriate form. Thank you.
Councillor Edwards.
Yeah, I'm a member of the Welsh Church Fund, and I'm also a member of the Farm School Endowment Fund. Both sets of accounts are in front of you this afternoon. I have a personal interest, but it's non-prejudicial.
Councillor Eason.
Yes, the Farm Trust, and also a governor of Welsh School and Dewsall School in Caldecott, which are mentioned in the report.
Councillor Strong.
Yeah, I'm a member of the Welsh Church Fund as well, so non-prejudicial.
Councillor Murphy.
I'm a governor at Shire Newton and Mountain House Special School.
And Councillor Prosser.
Yes, just to advise members, I'm replacing Councillor Dovey today, so I'm now a member of this committee with an interest.
And welcome to you. Just before we go on to do any other substantive business, I'll just let the committee know that I've agreed to move item 10 up the agenda. We're going to take it after item 5, the action list. This is because some officers have to go to another meeting. Right, so the minutes of the Audit Committee that we held in June which we've all seen. Any comments or observations? Yes, Councillor.
Yes, Chair. Paragraph 9, Chepstow Comprehensive School. The minute reports that in August 2012, issues around financial management were identified, and then it says the school is moving from a budget deficit. I don't think that minute is correct. The reason we had a presentation from the head teacher is because the school had an unsatisfactory audit, and the school was in fact in a 385,000, I think, from memory, deficit position. The minute over the page where it says the school has a recovery plan with the local authority, which is owned by the school governing body, is correct. But I think the minute should reflect that, in fact, the school's in an atrocious deficit position at the moment, and there are only plans to make it better. But from my recollection of the report, they haven't actually moved from that deficit position at this moment in time.
Well, the main point is the reason for the presentation was the unsatisfactory audit. Yes?
That's true, Chair, but part of the unsatisfactory audit was the fact that it was in a huge deficit position, and that seems to indicate here that the budget deficit is getting better. When it says the school is moving from a budget deficit, that isn't true. It's planned to be in budget deficit this year, next year, and I believe the year after.
Okay, well, we've seen some of those figures. Yes, Mr. Watson.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to clarify on that point, in terms of the August 2012 issues, the school actually stated that they identified financial management issues. Those weren't as a result of the audit report. Our audit report was later than that.
Well, I think we can agree to make an amendment along the lines that the councillor has suggested. If there's anything else on the minutes. Thank you. And a second, I think we need. Yes, thank you. Right, so we'll move on to the action list, which is here, because we're printing on both sides of the paper. Okay, Mr. Davis, the Head of Commercial and People Development, to provide an update on vacant posts to the committee. He came up with an interim reply, which has been circulated to members, I believe. And I think he's saying that there will be a further report. Similarly, with the information on early departures, but he has noted that some of this information is actually in the draft accounts which we're seeing. Yes, Councillor.
Yes, Chair. What Mr. Davis's report doesn't make clear is why the answers are so delayed. When this first came up, and I think it was back in February, we were told that it would be imminent, the reply, and then we were told, no, it would be 6 weeks. But 6 weeks was given as a maximum date. It's now something like 18 weeks, and we're being told that a report will be given at the next meeting. Without being given the exact reasons of why the delay is there. Is it inefficiencies in producing the programme, or are there inherent difficulties which make establishing exactly how many people we have working for the council a hard thing to assess? But I can't understand the delay, because we were promised a couple of weeks and then a definite promise that it would happen in 6 weeks.
Well, we do know from Mr. Davis's note, he says it's worth noting we have a number of notable capacity issues to contend with over recent months. Not least the team leader post was vacated in the Human Resources Payroll Support Team, and this has been a contributory factor in the delays. Do you have some more information?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I think Pete's note, and it's not a report, it is just a note, unfortunately, at this stage, sets out some of the issues that we've had in terms of the adequacy of our systems, and recently, just in the last few weeks, we've had to boost those. We've had to seek certain upgrades because some of the systems are letting us down, and that's something that we're going to be looking at from a software perspective in the future. But we've got to do some work to marry up the vacant post data across HR and finance. We've been provided with that information now by finance colleagues. But there is some work that we still need to do around automation processes, which take a long time because some of these things are still quite manual and repetitive, and we are trying to automate them, and we're mid-process on that. As Pete says in his note, the early departures information is contained in the year-end outturn, the year-end accounts, but we are still dealing with some very notable capacity issues, and I'm very sorry it's taken us this long. But even if we did have the capacity at the moment, due to some of the other constraints that I've mentioned with some of the systems and some of the work that we're having to do to fix those very quickly, we still couldn't provide it before September. So please accept my apologies and my assurances that a full and comprehensive report will be forthcoming in September.
Councillor Eason.
Thank you once again, Chair. We've seen over the last number of years reorganisation on top of reorganisations. Are we arriving at the point where further reorganisations will not be viable for the efficiency of the authority? Because we continually get to the point of we have a capacity situation. How much further down the road can this authority go in cutting posts, rationalisation, if we just can't deliver at the end of the day? You know, where's the end point?
Kelly Byrne.
Thank you. It's a very good question, and I think capacity is constrained right across the piece. We're a very small organisation, we're lean, we have made staff inefficiencies, but equally we generate income, and we place a great emphasis on being ever more effective with some of the services that we deliver. So I think what we're looking at, and in fact a report was presented to Cabinet yesterday, is in the future this has to be very much about a growth agenda, perhaps invest into generate, invest into earn. So a lot of the proposals that we put forward yesterday, which combined with an income optimisation strategy that Joy Robson and myself hope to bring to the next Audit Committee, I think you will see the approach for the future is set out in very clear terms.
Thank you. Very grateful that Kelly Byrne can be here because I knew Peter Davis wasn't going to be able to come today. All right, then I'll move on. Chief Internal Auditor to undertake a follow-up review of the school's progress. Well, that was that's really just a follow-up comment from the presentation that we had. Presentation by Eileen Close was emailed to the Audit Committee. Somewhere buried in the minutes, there is a reference to Arlene Close being invited to come back again once members had seen the presentation that was emailed to them if they had any further questions. This is based on the premise that there was a lot of information there, difficult to absorb. Things might occur to members later. And of course we can do that, but I also believe there's an opportunity if individuals want to meet some of the Arlene Close people, which can be arranged, I think, through Mr. Howcroft. Wales Audit Office report on the Audit Committee self-assessment workshop. We deferred that, and that's an item today. I hope to get through business quickly so that we could have a proper discussion about that. And then the internal audit section outturn report. Well, we of course are going to have a further report about the 6 unsatisfactory audits, I think, at a future meeting, unless there's something you want to say now.
Yes, Chairman, that's planned for the October Audit Committee meeting.
Right, thank you. Now I've just lost my agenda. Oh, there we go. Okay, so we're going to go on now to item 10, which is Wales Audit Office review of the Shared Resource Service, which we have a paper for. Agenda item 10. Now, there we go. The review of the Shared Resource Service, isn't it? Do we have anyone to introduce this report? Yes, Steve?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you. I think it's fair to say this report's been a long time coming to this Audit Committee. It's been on the cusp and been on the agenda for some time, actually, hasn't it? So I'm pleased to say, first of all, and pleased that it's actually on the agenda today in front of you, finally. A small project team undertaking the work, and as the work straddled not just Monmouth but other public bodies, the work wasn't undertaken by the Monmouth audit team, but the small project team actually did the work. Anthony Fode, my colleague who I'm sure you'd recognise, has been here a number of times before, was part of this project team, and he will take you through sort of the main findings from that work that are included in the report. But before he does, I'd just like to say really that it's very likely there could be some questions in this report. We'll do our best to answer them today as best we can. But if there are any issues we need to take away, because the work was done on a project basis, there could very well be issues we can't answer or any questions that we can't answer. But we'll endeavour, obviously, to respond to those questions as soon as we can. So just to sort of, hopefully, sort of provide some context. But I'll let Anthony sort of take you through it now.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Yeah, we have at long last got the SRS report, which has been delayed over a fairly lengthy period. But if I set out perhaps the background and context to the review, because that's important to understand before we get into the report. The reason we did the work, we had several items of correspondence from members of the public back in July 2012. That essentially the themes of those, I think there were 4 pieces of correspondence, were basically around the setup and then the ongoing management and governance of the SRS, and that was what drove our review. Obviously, you're all aware of the police investigation, and it was CPS advice that meant we had to defer our work. So essentially, the work was undertaken in over 2 phases. We did initial work and then had to park the project, return to it at a later date. And it was basically interviewing relevant staff across the 3 organisations, probably focused mainly on the Torvine element, because the setup was obviously key to the whole subsequent chain of events, but then meeting with Gwent Police and council staff and a fairly lengthy document review. So that's the background and context. If I just quickly take you through the timeline, we had the correspondence July 2012, set up a terms of reference several months later, and we issued our first draft report in November 2013. And I think it was soon after that, after we had initial comments on the draft report, that the police investigation was taking place, and that was what caused the significant amount of delay. Obviously, that delay itself, then, we were, in response to the draft report, there were a number of comments saying things had moved on. There was an internal strategic review, I think it's called Project Phoenix, and all of that meant additional information needed to go in the report. So there was a second tranche of work undertaken last autumn. Again, additional documents provided of what had happened subsequently, and the report was brought up to date. So what you have is the report that takes on board the initial stage and the second stage of that review. I should just say, in presenting the report at another body, they've questioned some of the information that they gave to us. They said it was incomplete, and there's a table of finance information, and they felt they wanted to get the right information in the report. So bear that in mind. There will be some minor tweaks to some of the figures in one of the tables towards the back of the report. But essentially, the content isn't disputed other than that. So consider it as a final with a few tweaks. The overarching question, was the SRS established properly? I think the report comments on that. But I think the purpose of me talking you through the report will focus on the Monmouth elements, because I think that's important. But also what you might want to think about going forward, what would be of interest to you where there are recommendations made for the SRS. All the recommendations in the report are SRS related, so nothing directly for Monmouth. I think we would, the issues for Monmouth were not around the decision to join. That was properly supported. There was a business case. It was the development of the financial information, which was over several iterations, rather than having all the right information up front to inform the decision. That was the nature of the beast, I guess, at the time, but probably the area that didn't work that well. The decision itself obviously was taken, and you know, there were no problems with that. What the second element is the management and governance, and I think that's probably where things have developed, but where there are the most areas of interest to the committee. Particularly, I would highlight some things that I think the committee might want to follow up on. But obviously, that's, you know, for you to determine what you see as relevant to the committee. So, and I think they are the finalisation of the SRS strategy. That was unclear at the time of the review and still hadn't been finalised. Future developments, the development of its performance management framework, what they see as their critical success factors, which in turn leads to how it can demonstrate it's delivering value for money, which is pretty much, you know, a key factor, I would see. Is it a comparable service to similar providers in the private sector or the public sectors, which is a difficult exercise, but obviously should give the council and then the committee comfort that you know, the decision is offering value for money, and you know, that can take that forward. From a information perspective, the SRS board papers need some strengthening of what information they have, what frequency they have it, and then what information is relevant to the council to report to cabinet, for example. And all of that is still, it's nearing completion, but it hasn't been finalised. So those, I think, are the key things going forward you might want to consider. The decision itself, I think I've commented on around strengthening the information at a time, but obviously that was at a point in time and I guess isn't relevant to the service you have now. I think the next steps, as I said, the report has gone through the three bodies. It's essentially finalised. There'll be a few tweaks, and again, if there are comments on any factual inaccuracies, happy to consider those. But what we're keen to do is to finalise this. So where the information in the report doesn't change, then we're happy to keep the report as it stands, but happy to take comments about where you see there might be any gaps in it. And I think the overarching theme is how the council and its various committees need to liaise with the SRS, what information is needed, to demonstrate value for money, it's providing its core service adequately and to an improving standard, and what information goes between the two bodies to achieve that. Happy to take any questions.
Councillor Murphy, I think, got his first question.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is a very fair report, but it's a fair report about what was. It's certainly got no connection whatsoever with what now currently is, or is in one or 2 points, as you've stated, about to be. When I got involved, and Kelly and Sean, the three of us had started to attend the SOS Public Board on a regular basis, and it is now true to say that we have board meetings scheduled up to in fact it's more than 12 months in advance. So there is a clear line of public board meetings and full accountability. I was the first elected member appointed to the board. There wasn't anybody even in the past who was in the board in the way it was, although Councillor Bob Greenland was on the SRS business solutions, but not on the public board. Since then, Torvine have appointed my opposite number there, Anthony Hunt, and Gwent Police have appointed Nigel Stevens. So we now have full representation from all of the partners. We instigated a full review of what was going on there, and from our point of view, we identified a lack of clear identity, the problems with the business plan, a long-term strategic vision. The core service wasn't established properly. There was no client-contractor split. The governance needed repurposing and improving. There was little sharing of services and systems. There were similar organisations, but with different needs, priorities and budgets. It wasn't well balanced. There was no gauge of return on investment. The investment in hardware infrastructure and the software needed to be looked at. The operational board wasn't strategic enough. I could go on, you know. All of that has been addressed. The SRS now is not what the SRS was when those reports were done. But I do stress that at the time that you did that work, I think it's a very fair reflection of what the situation, excuse me, I lose my voice, what the situation actually was. But it has changed considerably. I know Sean and Kelly will be itching to come in here from an officer point of view. I'm more than happy, because there's a lot of this, I'm more than happy through Nikki to share all of this. It includes a presentation of where we are, market testing, how we've gone out to Amazon and various places like that, to see if we can better the service. I'm more than happy to circulate that to members. I've only got my hands on this as it is today, so I haven't had the opportunity of doing it before. And if members want to agenda it for the next meeting after they've had a chance to look at it, quite happy to get Matt Lewis here to see what questions there are. But as I say, not the same SRS at all compared to what it was, and your report a true reflection. I'm quite certain that Kelly will want to come in now, if that's all right, Chair.
I think we have an item for the an agenda item for the next meeting there then, yes. Councillor Bertrini.
Yes, this obviously took place before I was a councillor. But I just want to say I take Councillor Murphy's point on board that it's not a reflection of SRS now, but I think we're here to learn lessons from how it was initially set up. So I hate it when actually councillors or anyone says that, because of course it isn't. It's 5 years down the line, and that's an obvious statement. So that really kind of bugs me. What I want to focus on, there's too many things to focus on, but on page 227, 24, point 24, sorry, right at the end of the paragraph, it says, information presented to the Cabinet in MCC also makes it clear that the financial assessment included in the report was not a detailed and in-depth audit of the associated finances of MCC's existing ICT system, or function, sorry. And again, this has never been provided to the council. So am I right in saying that we went into a joint partnership where we'd even have a full assessment of the financial costs of our own IT system at the time, and has never been requested since? Or if it has been requested, has it just never been acceded to? I find that amazing if that is the case. Can someone give us the answer to that?
Do we have an answer to that point just made?
I'll have a go. I mean, I don't think I was even around at the time that the financial business case was prepared. Perhaps Joy can comment on that further, albeit we did have somebody working with us, so I'm sure would have gone through that process. What I can say now is that on 3 occasions we've taken very comprehensive reports to Economy and Development Select Committee on SRS and the repurposing work that we've done. And I can tell you that about 2.1 million is the net cost, is the net contribution we make to SRS every year. And other than Sean and Emma Jackson and a very small budget that we keep in-house for updating servers, you know, that is the entirety of our budget for IT. But we can very easily set that out for you, and perhaps when we come to the next committee meeting to talk about SRS, we can provide that information to you comprehensively then. Joy, I don't know if you want to comment on business case preparation at the time.
Like other officers in the room, I wasn't actually involved in developing the business case because it was such a long time ago. But we would have had a budget for our IT section as it was. I'm not quite sure what the reference in the report to. I can only assume that it was about an analysis of what the financial situation would look like once we joined the SRS. I think what happened at the time was that we put our full budget into it. and subsequent savings were identified.
Thank you for that. Yes, you could come back.
Well, it was just to say subsequent savings were identified, but I think the next section goes on to say that actually SRS were over-optimistic in what they were going to deliver and how much savings they were going to deliver. Again, that's quite troubling, isn't it? I mean, with any kind of prediction, we should be cautious, conservative in what we assume we're going to get rather than really optimistic. So it seems like we went in not knowing the full cost of our own IT system at the time, as well as being told this is going to be all great and wonderful and look all the money you're going to save without the appropriate information. It's quite scary.
Yes, Kelly.
There is another perspective that I'd offer on that. And I can't comment on whether it was overly optimistic because I just don't know what went on at the time. But I do think that a lot of it was possibly down to the loss of a significant individual who had the vision and who kind of led the purpose. And I think, as you've stated in your opening, there was a bit of a hiatus then caused by the legal process that had to be undertaken. And I think it was probably more that discontinuity. And I'm not saying, it's because of that. I'm saying probably because of that, we'll never know. We'll never know which it was. Was it over-optimism? Or was it because of that hiatus, that gap, and that effective shutdown that happened, I think, for a period of time? So it's really hard to answer that with any certainty, Councillor Petruni, but I'd say, you have to consider both things there. But to give you some comfort now, as you know, we've got a 5-stage business case that we use, which is a government model. We'd have to go through a very stringent due diligence process if we were going to take a similar or the same path again. So things are not the same. And yes, we're here to learn lessons. You're absolutely right.
So just add the final. The service is what it is now, and you've got it. I think I would be focusing on the value for money information, core service, and the added value services it provides, and that will give you some comfort. Plus the work the Chief Operating Officer is undertaking on the benchmarking. I think that those are probably more relevant going forward. That's probably something, as has been said, we'll probably never actually have a absolute position on, and it certainly wasn't anything we saw in our review that we could comment on in any detail.
Did you have a question, Councillor Higginson?
It's more an observation than anything else, Chairman. Thank you very much for bringing me in. To be honest, with the three organisations being partners in this event, I'm surprised that the teething problems that are indicated within this particular document were as extensive as they were. And I thought there was enough expertise within the organisation to at least avoid some of the pitfalls. And like one, for example, ensure that attendees' roles, their responsibilities, and which organisation they represented are recorded in the minutes. For me, that's basic stuff. But I mean, there's a couple of other things never, consistently reporting and that type of thing. But I just want to finish by saying that I'm pleased that Councillor Phil Murphy was involved with it, come up with the statement that he did, that clearly is in a better position now than he was. But I just wanted to, I'm surprised it was in a bit of frankly, a mess at the start.
I'm going to go to Councillor Prosser.
Thank you, Chair. A lot of my points have been said, but I'd like to say that this report demonstrates the value of audit, really, in teasing out problems and reporting back to us. It's a long time ago that it all started. Since I've been on council, the council has changed immeasurably on the way it operates, the personnel, many facets, and I think we are getting better by the day. As a member of this committee, what I seek now is assurance that all the weaknesses identified in the report have been eradicated for the ongoing process with SRS, and that we have a report back on the way forward, if you like, on governance to this committee. I know there's been the review. I know they're getting there, but I'd like to see this committee have a look at that governance in the future. You say it's on the next agenda for the next meeting. I'm pleased with that, and hopefully we can see it then.
Thanks for that. Councillor Eason.
Yeah, thank you once again, Chair. Yes, when I joined this council, there was no SRS, but there was a need to keep up with technology at the time. I see this in retrospect as learning to drive a car. you've learned to drive, and now you're getting on the road. But only one question I'd like to ask of our auditors from Cardiff is, page 222, bullet point 9, you say the effectiveness of the SRS board in overseeing the management of the development has to date been mixed. Initially, scrutiny as oversight of the SRS was not possible. But you indicate that it's still not right. Now, this is dated May 2015. Is it better now, or was this particular bullet point written long before May 2015?
I think it reflects the whole period. It probably is mixed across the period, albeit all the improvements everyone's talked about and what we saw in our review around improved governance, better information, devising the strategic and operational elements of board, and plus some general housekeeping. A lot of that is now in. There are in place. There are elements to improve, such as reporting on the performance management framework. I think that one is, at the time of our review, was ongoing. I mean, one thing I should say, we could still be doing this review now because things were changing quickly. It is in IT, which is a fast-moving environment. So, you know, our review looking at any progress stopped pre-Christmas. So any changes that have gone on subsequently aren't reflected in here. So that's just useful to note. Things have improved. And I hope the report fairly reflects those. I think we did a lot of work with Torvine to making sure that any additional improvements to governance was in the report, and they were happy with it. But it's probably not quite where it ought to be. And most of the recommendations are around those sorts of things, and they're aimed at the SRS board.
Okay, I welcome the update.
Councillor Hayward.
Thank you, Chair. It's just to support what Councillor Potter and Councillor Eastham have said, really. This committee and also the Economy and Development Committee have been questioning the efficiency of SRS, this council and the previous council. For about 5 years, I can remember questions coming up asking, is it working right? Are we getting value for money? What exactly does SRS do? Is it producing? And the report obviously shows that we were right to question it at the time. Now, I take Councillor Murphy's points here, saying that we've now corrected most of the faults. We now have a member representative on the board, and we should now be going forward in a much better controlled way. But I think that it's worrying that members' concerns over the last 4 or 5 years have taken this long to come to fruition in an audited report, which just confirmed what councillors believed, but they had no facts. The SRS has been heavily defended by officers over the last 3 or 4 years, despite members just being concerned that what we were being told didn't reflect exactly what was happening on the ground, that overspends were happening, that we weren't sure where the money was being spent, that projects were taking much longer to produce than we thought. And so I wouldn't like it all to be closed off with this report now. Either this committee or the Economy and Development Committee should keep an eye on it and receive frequent reports from SRS, until we're confident that what people are telling us is true, because we've been told for the last 4 years that SRS was working perfectly. We didn't believe it, and this report really confirms that what councillors thought was in fact true.
Right, thank you for that. Do you like to make a contribution? Sorry, can you just introduce yourself? I've not got your name.
Okay. My name is Sian Hayward, and I'm Digital and Technology Manager for the Council. I manage the relationship between the SRS and the Council, and I was actually around at the time of its inception. And in the first year of operation, it radically, completely transformed our ICT provision. At the time, I was dealing with agile working, and if we hadn't had the SRS to do that work for us, we couldn't have implemented agile working. And I have to say that not in defending the SRS, but just defending the actual vision and the operation of the SRS, I wasn't involved in the original business case, but I'm not aware of any overspends in the SRS ever since its inception.
I think if you look in at the figures in the report, what the expenditure on MCC business, it seems to be under control. The general overrun in the budget for SRS seems to be in the area of Gwent Police, I think. And obviously we don't know what business is going on there, but yeah. So Kelly?
Thank you, Chairman. Just to give some comfort on that, I think about 16 months ago, Enterprise took on responsibility for strategic technology. So as a council, that piece about IT strategy sits with us. Just want to make that client-contractor split very real, because whilst we're responsible for technology strategically, SRS is a supplier, and that's the relationship that we have. But as soon as Councillor Murphy, myself and Sian went onto the board in that capacity, we actually instigated the review of SRS, and lots of the issues that Councillor Hayward's just spoken about and those that Councillor Murphy identified, we actually picked up upon. We highlighted them, we did a full review, we repurposed, we had a new vision for SRS, we divided it into 3 strands, so there was a strategic focus on finance, on governance, HR, accountability and culture. And then I just wanted to give you a flavour of what we've managed to achieve over that review process, because as soon as we'd done it, and I think we did it in a matter of months, we actually reported straight away to Economy and Development Select Committee. We were very open in sharing our concerns, but equally we were very targeted in terms of saying what we were going to do about some of those concerns. So one of the first things that we did was a market test. You know, we needed to know return on investment. Could we buy this service in cheaper elsewhere? So that's one of the first things that we implemented. We're now talking about cheaper models in terms of migration to cloud computing. Would that offer a cheaper, more efficient service long term? So that's one of the things that we're actually looking at the moment. Do we need a physical data centre anymore? You know, because that's very costly. It brings with it a big overhead. And the majority of organisations now are migrating to cloud virtual services. So that's something we're still investigating and going through a business case process around. You know, for the first time, we do have a comprehensive business plan. And what is more, we've now got a group of people, strategic advisors, working with us to see if we can formulate the long-term business strategy. Because there's no point having an annual business plan if you don't know where the thing is going in 5, 6, 7 years' time. So some of that clarity and strategic direction is taking shape. We've got partners potentially coming on board. We've got 2 local authorities, neighbouring authorities, who've made positive approaches about joining SRS, and we're asking the right questions. We're not saying, jump on in, guys. We're asking about their risk. We're going through due diligence. Are they going to be partners, or are they going to be customers? So we're going through that very comprehensive process. We've got commissioning documents for the first time. So every year we say to SRS, this is clearly what we want to buy in. You know, this is the way that we're going to govern and oversee our contract with you, if you like. We've established a research and development fund so we can investigate potential to invest to earn and invest to generate. And I've got to say, in echoing Sian's point as well, you know, they have shifted quite drastically in their focus. This is not just about in-house ICT provision anymore. This is about how can SRS work with us to develop the packages and solutions that allow us to save money and generate money right across our suite of activities as a local authority. So they've done some great work in developing a connected worker application in our operations division. They developed a system that allows us to charge for green waste. So they're actively contributing now to activity that we need to do right across the authority. We're not there yet, and I don't think we'll ever be there wherever it is. This is about a constant and continuous improvement journey. But I feel very comfortable where things are. And I think around the board table, you know, even though we've got differences, we are all on the same page and we have that shared purpose finally.
Thanks very much for that. What I expect to see then at the next Audit Committee meeting would be a paper basically saying all those things you are saying now about what's happened since this review. If it's all right with the committee, I'd like to move on. If okay.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Really to pick up on something that Councillor Hayward said, and of course he's absolutely right. All of these promises were made, and it wasn't until we actually got in there that we found out exactly where we were. But there was a reason for it, and in my view, overreaction, but there you are. When the problems with that particular individual surfaced and the police got involved, the police effectively caused problems within the host authority for the employees, which is Torvine, which meant that effectively all they did was just allow it to tick along. Our involvement that we've been talking about here happened to coincide with the lifting of that pressure from the police. So really it was a combination of two things that have led to the entirely changed view of the people who work at the SRS. They're just not the same people, and that was the underlying reason for it.
Thank you for that. Councillor Edwards?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Can we just take an opportunity to acknowledge the work that Sean Hayward has done on this particular aspect, and then the support that subsequently with Kelly and with Councillor Murphy. The decisions to go into SRS were made long before Sean or Kelly was here. Sean was here, but Kelly wasn't. And I think the officer in question who pushed this at the time is no longer with the authority. And I take on board exactly what Councillor Murphy has just said with reference to the extreme difficulties with the police investigation that took place way back now, 4 or 5 years ago. So I think we should, I hope, put this particular report to bed and look forward to the further information that we're going to get in due course.
Thanks for that. In that case then, I'd like to just note that we've received the report and have noted what further action we expect in the committee.
And I have forwarded that information I spoke about to Nicola, so that members can be served.
Thank you. Right, I'm going to move on then to the Treasury Outturn report, which is item 6. Is someone going to introduce this paper? Is this Mr. Howcroft?
Thank you, Chair. The most detailed aspect of the report is the Appendix 1, which was written by our Treasury advisors, and as you might expect from expert advisors, it's a fairly comprehensive understanding of the environment affecting Treasury management for last year. It's useful background in understanding where we are, but actually a lot of the information pertaining to European Central Bank and some of the more global context of it probably hasn't got that much of a bearing on our individual Treasury activities through the year. So what I've tried to do with the covering report is to focus very much on those activity indicators, i.e. the level of borrowing that we've got, the collective rate of return that we derive from them, and give you an understanding of the level of investment. One of the things that commonly gets raised at an audit committee is, could we be deriving a bigger rate of return on our investment? I'd like to remind members of the committee that our strategy to this is that we actually use our cash balances and our reserve balances to avoid borrowing. So whilst if we invest at the moment, we will get of the order of 0.5% interest, using that, our internal money, internal borrowing, to avoid borrowing in the market means that effectively we save the difference between what it costs us to go out for a loan and what we gain on interest. So if you think that, as an indication, a 20-year loan at the moment is of the order of about 2.5%. If your investment balance you're getting 0.5% on, effectively you're saving 2% worth of costs in terms of using your internal resources. So if I take you through the summary report, it explains that all our Treasury management activities are underpinned by the code. This is one of a suite of reports that you received during the year in terms of setting the Treasury strategy and then assessing delivery of it. I'm pleased to say that there's been no variations against the strategy that you set for 14-15 in terms of the tolerances. And the key aspects of it are that we have a capital financing requirement of nearly 123 million. but obviously we've only borrowed 99 million in terms of external loans, so that gives you an understanding of the amount of internal borrowing that we actually apply. The average rate on short-term borrowing is about 4.46%. So you can see how that really equates quite closely to what our investment rates are. Our cost of carry between borrowing short-term money and investing short-term money is very negligible. So what we have done this year is actually adopted a strategy whereby if we do need to borrow money, we're borrowing short-term, because at the moment it's rather unusual that actually short-term money is a lot cheaper for us than long-term money. So you'll see a series of recurring short-term loans as opposed to long loans. But we are in 15-16 coming to a period due to 21st century schools, which will mean that we will move into a significant borrowing position. And at that point in time, we will probably actually fix some of our long-term loans to actually derive more of a balanced portfolio in terms of short-term and long-term debt and mitigate our risk and exposure to interest rates. So our long-term rates, we have borrowings of 67 million. The average rate on that is 4.74%. You may think to yourself that looks a bit high in terms of what we might borrow at today's money. You're right, but that's actually a portfolio over a number of years and reflects the fact that some of these loans are fairly historic in nature. We do actively look at the ability to reprofile our loans and derive other loans, but obviously with some of the older loans, and there were only 3 that were appropriate last year, the actual costs of actually renegotiating those was more than the cost of the interest, so we've carried on with those and we'll let them expire naturally. So our total debt is just over £1 million, and at the end of the financial year we had 12.2 million invested in short-term investments. We don't actually make any long-term investments because of the short-term nature of our borrowing strategy. We need to have a liquidity around our cash resources. I do explain a little bit about the market conditions. One of the more important aspects to us this last year is that you may recall at our training meeting with Arlen Close, they explained the issue of bail-in, that effectively large institutional investors will end up being responsible for bailing out any failing banks. We would come into that category. It seems in terms of mitigating our risks to do so that actually we use our resources to avoid borrowing rather than necessarily investing. And that's in an environment that a lot of the rating agencies that you may know of are actually downgrading a lot of our household and high street institutions to reflect this bail-in. So increasingly you'll find that actually the rates that we set ourselves in terms of a treasury strategy, the AA ratings, will be increasingly hard to provide with people that we would expect to be fairly safe investment opportunities. So it is becoming increasingly harder to find those that A, derive a sufficient return for us, and B, evidence a sufficient rating to meet with the treasury strategy. So that's another good reason why we actually, instead of focusing on investment opportunities, we simply use it to defer our borrowing. And I'm happy to take any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Are there any questions or observations from the floor about the Treasury outturn report? Councillor Eason.
Yeah, thank you. I'll phrase my question without getting too involved. You suggested internal borrowing is better. Did you suggest internal borrowing on a prudential basis is better than external borrowing, based on a decision that was most probably taken in strong communities the other day to support a way forward? I've got to phrase it that way, sorry.
What I'm saying is that if I equate it to your household budget at home there, if you're looking to buy a car, yes, you could borrow that money, but if you've got that resources in your bank account, you may very well use that to buy your car rather than borrow. It is a more cost-effective way of doing it, particularly given the problems associated with ensuring that our investments remain secure.
Just to clarify one thing. Internal borrowing is not the same as prudential borrowing.
I'm not sorry, I didn't mean that. I was trying to phrase my words in a proper way because of the nature of what I was talking about.
Okay, well, Councillor Higginson.
Chairman.
Sorry.
I move the recommendation.
Yes.
No.
Yes, well, I was going to say if there are not a lot of hands shooting up to ask questions, we'll note the Treasury Actuary report. Thank you very much for that. It's always very important information for the committee. But we have been over some of this ground in meetings recently. So thanks for that. Okay. Yep, sure.
I notice, unfortunately, Councillor Petruni is not with us for the Treasury, but there's a general offer there that actually our Treasury advisors do meet with the finance team periodically, and if there are any issues that you wish to progress or any further training that you need in something that is quite a technical area, I'd be quite happy to facilitate that either before or after those meetings, if that would be at all useful to you.
Thanks for that. Okay, I'm going to move on then to the next item, which is the Statement of Accounts 2014-15, item number 7. Do we have someone to introduce that paper, please? Yes, Mark.
Me again, I'm afraid. You might get tired of my voice this afternoon. This is the draft Statement of Accounts that's been provided to our WA colleagues for their scrutiny over the next couple of months. It would be fair to say that actually I do expect there to be changes in the accounts through that process because that is fairly commonplace. I don't think there's any particular surprises there. I mean, most of you will have been familiar with the outturn last year, and whilst the statement of accounts isn't the same as a set of management accounts because it includes all sorts of factors of depreciation and revaluation adjustments, I think overall it was a pretty good year last year. The format for the accounts, we are always trying to simplify them and make the process a bit more streamlined and easy. It's a bit difficult when a lot of this is prescribed by statement of recommended practice or by professional bodies to do so. We do have a pressure going forward to try to take a month out of that process to get the statement of accounts prepared. That's going to be quite a challenge for us that we're going to have to work with our WAO colleagues, so there will be a number of simplifying assumptions, I suspect, in most local authorities' accounts. I have provided a summary set of accounts, a 3-page summary, which gives people perhaps a more simplified perspective of where the money is spent and and how it's been funded, that I hope is of use to you. And in one of the changes from past years, what I've actually done is added the annual progress report that we share with WAO to the back end of the statement of accounts, because you may remember that you get this after the statement of accounts in terms of what the deficiencies are, and the normal progress response from officers will be, yes, we'll consider that when we're preparing the next set of accounts. I thought it quite sensible to actually marry the two together to actually demonstrate A, what the issue was in last year's accounts, and B, to reassure you the progress that was being made. And I'm happy to take any individual questions.
I think Mrs. Robson wants
Can I just take the opportunity to record my thanks to Mark and the team. They've worked exceptionally hard to bring the statement of accounts to you this year, being one down in the team as well. It has been a tremendous challenge to them. So my thanks go to them and the cooperation they've had around the authority to provide the information to you today.
Thank you. Councillor Higginson.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a quick one, and it's on page 90, it's 10.4, and we got a single status and equal pay reserve. That's the first question. Is there any need for that now?
No, there isn't. And what we actually did as part of the closing exercise was we expired that reserve. If I could refer to the cabinet payment on paper on the outturn report, that was a reserve set up 5 years ago when most local authorities started looking at equal pay claims, and was a sensible and prudent decision given the fact that the legal aspect was being contested in some councils. I'm pleased to say in those 5 years we haven't had any such issues here, and it's right and proper, and we have spoken to the auditors that now is a reasonable time for expiring and using it for other things.
I got one more question, and then there are two very good observations if I put that way. And on the following pages in 11.3, the housing revenue account, the pensions deficit reserve, is there any need for that to be put into the papers as they are now, as indeed the previous one? Because if they're not being used, then you know why put them in? Why put them in the you know, into the detail?
Got the page number?
No, I haven't.
Can you just tell us what page number you're on? We're just struggling to find it. Sorry.
On page 91, the earmark reserves continue. It's a half a page, and just on the front, pretty much the third line down, you were investor redesign reserve, and the third one down from there, HRA pension deficit reserve. There's nothing in there in terms of finance account in that. Is it the point I'm making? We don't have housing anymore. Sorry, Chairman. We don't have housing anymore, and I just wondering, is there any need for that to be in this set of accounts?
There's actually nothing in it, and the line could have been deleted. I think that would be one of the amendments that would be made to the accounts through the audit process.
Right, thanks. And the other is the good news bit, is what we're doing on trading outside, the grounds maintenance, surplus, highways, surplus. That's got to be good for, you know, I think it's creditable for the officers concerned that they can turn around something, you know, which is making money for this authority.
Yeah, agree.
Councillor Edwards.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm sure that Mrs. Robson won't be surprised if I raise the issue of the pension fund of Monmouthshire County Council. And I noticed that the deficit was risen by 41 million last year, which is, if you look at that's on page 28, and if you look at the balance sheet, which is prepared for page 30, our total reserves are 40,373,000. And so if we have another bad year of investment, will the pension scheme own Monmouthshire County Council at the end of the day? Because it does, you know, it's quite huge. This is something which appears to be completely out of control. And coupled with that, there are some other questions. I noticed that we as ratepayers or taxpayers are paying just over 21% on behalf of each of our employees on average. And I'd just like to know what are the employees paying into the scheme. It probably varies to a certain extent depending on the salaries, but you know, there are some organisations now nationally who expect employees to pay figures approaching 14%. And can I have some comment on the prospects of further bad news as far as the pension scheme overall value is concerned, and you know, what contribution should employees be making to assist the system, and why should we as ratepayers continually bear the brunt of it?
Do you have an answer to a response to those points?
As I say to you every year, the pension fund deficit and the adjustments in the accounts do go both ways. So we have had years when it has been beneficial to the authority's accounts. As the economy picks up, you know, the fund will do better. The investments in the fund will do better. We are due another actuarial valuation on the fund towards the end of this financial year, so we'll know better what the position of the fund is in and what rate we need to pay as an authority going forward. In terms of what employees pay, you're right, there is a range. I'm not quite sure what it is. It's something like 6% up to 10 or 11%, depending on the salary banding that each individual employee sits in.
Can I come back, Chair? Can we have a list of those rates in due course? Yeah, I'm fully aware that last year there was a reduction, I should say, in the debt on the pension fund by something like 28 million, and this year it's gone up by 41. And the year before that, I think it was 40 odd million as well. So it really is a very, it'll be interesting to see what the triannual valuation comes in with later on this year. Can I, turning to the balance sheet also on page 30, could you tell me whereabouts in the accounts, you know, we've actually holding a site in Abergavenny, the cattle market site, and we also now own a site in Raglan. In which of the assets are they listed, and at what sort of value are they listed?
I can find out the exact values, but as a category, they would be held in the assets held for sale line.
Right. Yeah, I've actually gone through this lot, and I can't find any mentions of the cattle market individually or the cattle market in Raglan as sort of, you know, they were additions. I think last year.
It was in my asset list when I looked at this yesterday, but probably the best thing to do is if I explain to you how much it is and how much it's standing to and which line it's in, that might be helpful to you, yeah.
And do the accounts reflect the rent that we're getting now for the cattle market at Raglan? And was there a bonus attached to it? I think there is a per capita aspect of the rent of the new cattle market at Raglan. Do we have any figures?
You have me at a disadvantage there because you probably know more about the intricacies of that arrangement than I do, but I will, at the same time, in responding to the other aspect, I will ask Roger Hoggins what the arrangements were around the Raglan market and give you a full and response.
Yeah. Sorry, Chair, so me again. Page 92 shows the school balances, and I'm shocked or delighted, I'm not quite sure which, to see that Derry View has managed to reduce a massive deficit of something like £200,000 to a surplus. You know, how much money to give them to settle it off? You know, the 1 year there's a deduction of 90-odd thousand and 101,000 on the following year. You know, where does all this money come from all of a sudden?
They might do, but given the size of their deficit, they would have had a recovery plan that they agreed with colleagues in CYP. So I suspect over a prolonged period, actually, they've ended up cutting their costs accordingly. I don't think it's the case that we've actually given them more money to be able to expire that reserve. I think that's all formula driven through the delegation to schools arrangement.
I think Councillor Murphy might have a contribution here.
Yeah, it just shows the effectiveness of our recovery plans. Can I just say something about the previous question about the rent on the cattle market? That information will have to be provided by Mark. I know what it is, but it's commercially sensitive and I wouldn't want to mention it in this meeting. And when you get it, it's also commercially sensitive.
Well, thanks for that. Yes, you can carry on. It's always good to have a proper forensic examination of these papers.
57 or 91, whichever you want to. It's got earmarked reserves continued. 10.4, I think, in the overall accounts. What is invest to redesign the reserve? And the priority investment reserve, what are they and what are they used for?
The priority investment reserve is a reserve that we set up to allow investment in the council's priorities. So the reserve has been used in CYP and in social services to enhance, but especially in CYP, to enhance standards in schools. So it's to help promote the priorities of the council, the 3 or 4 priorities that you've got. The Investor Redesign Reserve is to help the council move from where it is now to where it needs to be to redesign services so that it can live within its means.
I can just add to that, Chair, if you look at the Cabinet papers from yesterday, we actually used it quite effectively then.
Okay.
Yeah, still a question. Page 101. I think Yeah, on page 101, it's 11.3, retail markets. They're now running at a loss? And if so, how? And much the same with industrial units. They're also running at losses. We're running at profit, the industrial units, now take on into a loss situation. Is there any reasonable answer to that?
I think we're going to have to go back, take that question back and have a look at the individual accounts in those particular areas and come back to you.
I noticed with the retail markets, actually, the loss in 13-14 was 594. This year it has improved to 192, but it's still running at a loss. So I would appreciate further information. On game 203. Yeah. The provision, the provision in LM4 to either of you, the provision for non-payment of council tax 421, 421,000 actually. Massive increase over the previous year. Any particular reason, or is it just being prudent?
We review every year the outstanding balances on our council tax accounts, so it would have been based on the mechanisms we use to establish what we need to make as a provision. It does go up and down each year depending on what balances we have outstanding, so I can try and provide you more detail on that, but if you want it.
No, it's all right, Joy. I appreciate, with debts like that, I appreciate it can go up and down. You have to make necessary provision.
But Mark may have something to say.
Yeah, I mean, one of the reflections that I can probably put to that is that historically we've applied an instalment basis, allowed people to pay by instalments, generally 10 instalments starting in the April. I think one of the changes we've made in recent years is to actually allow that to be a monthly basis. So you'll find that where you might have expected any council tax settlements to be sorted by January, the tendency is for them to move into February and March, which would have affected the calculation of a bad debt provision.
Yes,
I would add, Chair, that hasn't affected the collection rate. It hasn't affected the collection rate at all, or the collection methods.
Good. No, can I acknowledge the collection rate has always been good with this authority? Yeah. And can I also add, Chair, I think Joy just thanked Mark and the team there. Can we as the Audit Committee also add our thanks to, it's a colossal job to prepare these accounts, and I think we should show our appreciation as well to Joy, Mark, etc. It is important. Sorry to keep Gasset on this one. One that I think it's been highlighted this year, because it's in red, and this municipal mutual insurance. What's it all about? They went bankrupt, I presume.
It's highlighted in red.
Holding a baby.
Right. It's highlighted in red, not to probably bring it to your attention, but to keep it in my attention, to be honest, because that's information that's administered through Newport Borough Council. They're obviously closing their statement of accounts as well, and what you find with this is that there's a sharing of information through that closing process, and that's one of these items that we're still awaiting on to actually add into our accounts. MMI was a common insurance agency insuring local authority activities. They went bankrupt or into liquidation in, I think it was 96, if I recall, a fairly long time ago, but as a consequence of which, any insurance matters that relate to those times cannot be afforded from that fund. So those authorities that utilise MMI have actually, there's a residual fund that is administered by Newport that means we actually put into it a contribution to mean that if we end up paying any of those claims out, there's actually a pot to be able to do so. And B, that we keep on top of whether there's any unexpired losses or claims that we're likely to get in. So the whole management of that activity, we use the Newport's insurance service, which is a lot bigger than Monmouthshire's. We only have 1.5 individuals involved in insurance, whereas actually they approach insurance in a far more collective way and have a whole claims handling side of it. So they do it on behalf of all of the Gwent authorities, but it's just information that we don't have when we have to give the accounts to the auditors.
On 129, I suppose it's good news. This is the provisions in contingency liability continued. Section F, the Abac of any regeneration scheme. That's obviously good news that we won the action in court and didn't have to pay any costs. Last but not least, can I just dip into the Welsh Church Fund on page 164? And I asked this question last year, Joy. And who are these three mythical councillors who are are on the deciding board, just for governance of the charity? He says 3 representative councillors from each of the 5 administration areas of Blaenau, Gwent, etc. Who are these 3 councillors?
Could I be helpful? I think he comes out in the AGM, doesn't he, on the outside bodies? It's in that documentation where every year at Council's annual general meeting, representatives of these outside bodies are there, and most of them are for term of council. Off the top of my head, I can't remember who they are, but I believe Councillor Sue White is one.
Well, I'm baffled because the 3 councillors who actually act on the Welsh Church Fund and make the recommendations to the thing are myself, Councillor Strong, Councillor Webb, if I remember correct, and Councillor Evans. There's 4 of us there. So,
Can I come back in on that? The Welsh Church Fund, as it's administered by this authority, is one thing, and the Welsh Church Fund, as is administered by a number of authorities, is something else, and that's where the 3 representatives go, is to the overall, the global authority, if you like.
Chair, perhaps Joy will come back to us, and it says distinctly 3 representative councillors of each administration.
I can dig out the response that I sent to you last year, and it will be exactly the same.
Yeah, well, it said it was you.
Well, if someone could look in whoever the author was of this, well, it's Mrs. Robson, of this account, just to see whether there needs to be more clarity about.
The council is the trustee of Welsh Church Fund. Yeah. There are 3 representatives from because we oversee it for the former Gwent area, there are 3 councillors that can potentially meet with other councillors from other Gwent areas to oversee the fund. I'm not sure that body has met recently to do anything, but they are there in case they need to meet to oversee the fund. But we, as Monmouthshire County Council, are the trustees and make the decisions on the fund.
Yeah, actually, Councillor Hayes says he doesn't think it. When he was on it, they met either. So.
Okay, that's beginning to be a bit clearer. Oh, you're welcome. I think Councillor Eason was the next person to.
Mouth is getting dry there.
Come in.
Two questions. One is for Mr. Wathen. Page 15 or 49. The audit team has been up and down, like whatever you want to call it. You've only managed 65% of your plan work this year. With your level of complement, if you can't retain that staff, do you envisage this year only getting maybe 30% of your work done with a roll on from the other 35% last year? And is there a way out of this problem in the long term? The second question is back to the school budgets, school deficits, and what. There's a drive to reduce school levels of surplus, isn't there? And I understand that in another forum there was talk of clustering budgets, clustering schools to make it more efficient. I'm not talking about Chepstow School here now. It'd be more efficient in the way of running school budgets. Could you comment on that, please?
Do you want me to go first?
Yes.
I'll go first. Okay, thanks, Chairman. In terms of the team, as you know, we prepare an audit plan based on the resources we have at the beginning of the year. We do have vacancies from time to time, and that does impact on our ability to complete the audit plan. We are going through a recruitment campaign at the moment to try and fill the gaps, and we will be reporting back to Audit Committee on a fairly regular basis in terms of where we are in terms of compliance with the plan. But I think our intention is to give as much coverage as we possibly can across the whole authority to give you and senior management assurance on the adequacy of internal control environment, governance and risk.
Collectively, the schools repaid into their balance at the end of last year, which is a more positive effect than I was anticipated in the monitoring all year. In terms of the cluster, the delegation of schools is quite clear that we must delegate a budget to individual schools. There's no recognition in the regulation to recognise clusters. But there is a sense in schools working together, sharing resources, sharing practices, etc., that have meant that clusters have manifest themselves. I was actually quite pleased to see that quite pleased to see that individual schools now are actually putting some of their resources behind some of the practice to be able to facilitate that. How that works as a mechanic is that the money is delegated to the individual schools, and then they decide collectively to create this cluster reserve.
Councillor Hayward.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one. During the paper on SRS, we were informed by Sian Hayward that the SRS was funded by all the IT budget, that we passed our IT budget across to SRS as our part of the funding. On page 91, there's an IT transformation reserve. Is that part of the funding for SRS, or is this extra money that we're spending on IT? And does any of the money from the priority investment reserve, not the priority, the investor redesign reserve, does that also go on IT? And is there anywhere in these accounts that we can actually see the figure that this council spends on IT? Is it simply what we give to SRS, or have we got other pots of money hidden in the reserves or in the accounts?
There are reserve balances that the council has built up specifically for IT-based initiatives. They are MCCs to deal with as it chooses fit. They're not the SRSs to control, unless we require SRS to do some work on our behalf, and in which case we will utilise that reserve in funding the initiative. In terms of the overall cost of the council in terms of IT, it is shown in a variety of places. What I will try to do is pull together the account codes that are of an IT nature that will give you a more holistic position, if that would be helpful.
Yep, that's good. So the information that we were given in the first report, that the entire IT budget was given to SRS to fund SRS, was not correct? Only one of the budgets was given to SRS?
Well, a reserve technically isn't a budget. It's a resource, a set of money put aside for a specific project, whereas a budget is a costed amount per year. You could have an IT reserve and not utilise it for any number of years.
Okay, I understand that, but what I was trying to get an understanding of is, well, what money was given to SRS? Where did the 2.6 million, which budget, reserve, cost, code, whatever, did SRS grab hold of when they were originally set up? And when we come each year, when we fund it, you know, what's the difference? We were told that the entire IT budget was given to SRS.
Perhaps if I can come in, Chairman, the budget that was given to the SRS was the revenue budget that the council had for running its IT section. So there was a total cost centre budget for that, a revenue budget, and that was the budget that was used to go into the SRS to establish it. In addition, further down the line, several other budgets were identified around the authority for people that were doing IT type work within the directorates, and they were transferred into the SRS and their budgets went with them. So in terms of what budget was transferred into the SRS, it was revenue budgets. The reserve position is reserves that the authority holds for IT investment, essentially. So it's more likely to be of a capital nature. So we decide whether we're going to invest in more servers or equipment or networks, and we will allocate the reserve to that as part of our, and it probably feature as one of our capital projects, and will be funded by the IT reserve.
Thank you for that. Perhaps, Chair, if we could take Mark's offer, though, and put together all the cost codes that we spend on IT, so that we have some idea as a council what we do spend on IT.
I think Mr. Howcroft made that commitment, so yeah. Councillor Prosser. No, not Prosser, Councillor Strong.
Just on to page 108, it's the Monmouthshire Farm Endowment Trust account. It was just really the investment income on 679,000 was £5,000, which is what, 0.75%, I would think. They did receive from Roger Edwards Educational Trust last year 37,000, which was on a fund of roughly £1 million. There's a tremendous difference in the returns on both those funds. I just wondered, I do ask every year, and we never seem to increase the income as far as the farm trust is concerned. I just wondered if anything could be done to invest possibly a little bit more money in something that would return a lot more to the fund.
I think that is the case, and I'm recalling my comments last year, which was to volunteer the services of Arling Close to get an investment strategy that that would best meet the farm fund's needs. Now, my understanding was that they actually met, I think, last September, October time, and that actually the appetite for risk of the trustees was satisfied, so that the investment returns reflect that. I'm getting a couple of nods around the room there, but I don't actually attend those meetings myself to be able to confirm that.
Just for information, Chair, yes, they've changed their strategy. We changed strategy from last October, if I remember rightly, but I don't think it would have come into effect until early this year. Was that correct, Doug? Okay.
So from that comment, I suspect it's a work in progress, and over time you will see better returns. But obviously, it tends to be a product of how long you're prepared to invest for, and I suspect the issues that I face around Treasury and investing money more generally are probably exactly the same issues that the Trust will face in terms of security, liquidity and yield.
Okay, well, thanks for all of that. I suggested at this point we note the statement of accounts, and we know that this is now subject to external audit.
For clarification, what you would normally get is the final version around September time, following up on the WAO's review of it.
Okay, so I'm going to move on now. And my heartfelt thanks to everyone involved in this major piece of work. We move on then to agenda item number 8 from the internal audit section, contract procedure rules exemption report, which is a regular report to us, I think. Mr. Watson, would you like to introduce it?
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Yes, this is one of the reports I bring to Audit Committee on a 6-monthly basis to update members in terms of any exemptions which have been applied for and approved for against the contract procedure rules. Ideally, we do a lot of procurement within the authority, and ideally, we want people to make sure the rules are followed. So these are an exception basis, and as you can see by the numbers, which we'll come to in a moment, they are minimal compared to the number of procurement exercises we undertake across the whole authority, across the whole services. If I can refer members to paragraph 5.3, that gives a summary of all exemption requests that have been submitted since we started reporting into the Audit Committee in 2009, and the numbers tend to go up and down on a sort of 6-monthly basis. You probably note in the last line from 1st November 2014 to the end of May that there were a significant number of exemptions requested during that period compared to the previous period, mainly because within social care, the commissioning team were trying to get things back on track and taking some advice, and we're trying to get retrospective approval for some things which were currently ongoing within their field of expertise. And I'll come to that in a moment in terms of the stats I've produced. 5.4 gives an outline and comparison of the latest period compared to the prior period. A number of requests returned to my team because we collate this information, the number that have been correctly authorised, the number not required, and the number returned. And again, I can give an update because there are significant numbers in the last period compared to the previous period. And generally, there's a range of values which are concerned. So if there's an exemption required, it may go to a head of service, or it may need to go to a chief officer, or if it's above a certain limit, it will go to a cabinet member for approval. And all those forms, once signed, come back to me to collate and provide some information and some challenge in certain extent to a certain extent as well. Where I feel things haven't been authorised properly, then I will challenge that particular officer, and we can report that back to you as Audit Committee. In terms of paragraph 6.1 and the detail, 33 requests were, exemption forms were requested, and 11 have not been returned to the audit team at the time of reporting. I've subsequently got an update on that, and of the 11 that were reported, were not returned, 9 are no longer required because within the commissioning team within social care, they've had a rethink about whether or not they needed to obtain retrospective authorization for certain things, and what they've decided is that they actually need an approved list of providers. So they're going to do a bit of a project and incorporate as many approved lists as they can for the services that they require. And some of these things are like running a cafe around the authority for people with Alzheimer's disease. Now, that cafe is run by the Alzheimer's Society because they intend people going to the cafe to share their experiences or concerns with professionals in that particular field. That doesn't really warrant an exemption under our contract procedure rules. So they're going down a different avenue, and that will be approved accordingly in terms of a proper approved list. The other two remaining unreturned items, one has subsequently been returned, and that's now okay. It's been authorised properly. And the last form, which hadn't been returned, is awaiting confirmation of a decision from the actual department. It was in relation to the purchase of a vehicle, which was on lease, and there was a question of whether they should actually buy that outright. The exemption form was requested by the transport team. They're currently waiting for the department to get back to them to confirm whether or not they want to go ahead with that decision. Then all I've done for members is then detailed the individual exemptions on Appendix 1. But I don't intend going through those in any detail, Chairman, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, do we have any questions or observations from those present? If not, I'll say thank you very much for that report, and we'll note it. I now need to move on to the next item, which is the improvement plan audit certificate. I understand that this is really just a formal thing, that we just have to note the certificate. I don't know if there's any more to it than that. Mr. McLean, would you like to just tell us about it? That's fine with me.
Okay. Yes, there is in fact very little to say about this really. I think the paper and the letter is quite self-explanatory. Performance audit colleagues have actually undertaken the audit of the improvement plan, which is required by the local government measure, and this certificate just confirms that audit's been completed, first of all, and secondly, the council has discharged its statutory responsibilities and duties in regard to the improvement plan, and that's basically it really. It's a positive certificate, and it draws a line, I guess, under the audit. But I understand Will McLean has a few more comments in regard to some further sort of feedback on the audit to the council. Yeah.
Thank you, Steve. Yes, if I could just add a couple of comments. Alongside the decision of the Auditor General to change the way in which he audited improvement plans, which went from being a much more substantive piece of work to the issuing of a compliance certificate, we've been fortunate in that colleagues from WAO have undertaken a full audit of the piece of work, but they've also provided us with some informal feedback. And it's important that I stress at committee today that this has been provided, I suspect, largely to help the authority in terms of how it develops its plans in the future, but also that that this is in draft at the moment. But in terms of timeliness, it didn't seem appropriate to bring the certificate today, but then not to refer to the feedback we'd had from the WAO as well. So, as Steve has pointed out, that the authority, the WAO, has signed off the improvement plan, which is a positive, and they came to that conclusion, they're saying, because the plan describes the authority's arrangements to secure continuous improvement, although these are not always specifically influenced by public consultation. It says the plan describes how the authority will secure achievement of its improvement objectives. However, in some cases, it's not clear how success will be measured. And then it does go on to note that the plan was published on the 20th of May within the timescale viewed as reasonably practicable. But I think, really importantly, there's just a couple of messages, if I could just draw out for the committee. In terms of the alignment and so on, the Wales Audit Office say that there is a clear and logical flow in the plan between the priorities of the single integrated plan, the Council's administration's own political priorities, and to the 5 improvement objectives. The plan sets out an improvement framework linking employee objectives to the overall Council vision and other higher level documents. And the plan includes a rationale for each of the 5 improvement objectives, and there are 2 distinct sections, narrative and numerical, to describe the intended progress and performance for each improvement plan. And I think that recognition is quite important. They do offer some observations of things which we could do differently in the future. They talk about perhaps making our public consultation a little bit more explicit, rather than us referring to more general consultation events we do. And they also cite that we don't list the 7 improvement aspects cited in 2.2 of the measure within the plan as well. And that's simply a drafting thing which we can address next time. In terms of one of the things which we've been really trying to do to make it very clear for all committees, both Select and Audit Committee and Cabinet, of course, is to make sure that we make it very clear to people what we're going to try and achieve and how we're going to measure our progress against that. And with regards to this, the WAO say that each improvement objective has sections on what we will do, the timescale, the milestones, and what difference it will make. They see that as a positive. They see the way we mix both narrative and numerical evidence as a positive. And also that prior performance as well as future targets are presented in the plan as a positive as well. They do obviously have some observations for improvement. They'd like us to state which officers are actually responsible and accountable for delivery of certain aspects, and that's something which we'll build on in our future plans and in our Stage 2 plan as well, so that's very clear. And I think they'd like some greater clarity around how we measure milestones as well as targets themselves, and I think that's for us to work with them to understand the difference between progress in a project and actually delivery at the end of that. They do make one comment which is interesting in terms of performance, that there are a small number of indicators which state a decline in performance, and they don't quite see why that's included in an improvement plan. And I think that we would suggest that in light of the general ongoing financial climate, we will see us begin to specify in a very open and transparent way a number of measures which we will expect to see a deterioration in, and we want to be open and transparent with members about that. But I just wanted to take the opportunity just to provide a little bit more context of the helpful feedback we have had from the WAO in terms of the certificate, because I think that would be valuable rather than just taking the certificate as an item. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks for that. Just for my information, we have various reports about recommendations for MCC action and what's been agreed and what the council are going to do and what's been agreed with WAO. The specific items that you're referring to here, have they been referred to in a paper we've already seen?
In terms of different kind of improvements to the planning processes?
I mean, for instance, in the accounts, there's a paper has been included in the accounts, which is about, let me see what the title was, a joint progress document. And given that, you're talking about changes that may or may not be made in reporting, are we talking about something similar, or is it a different document?
No, we keep all of our, we log all of the recommendations and proposals for improvement from the WAO in a single document and track that across the pieces to where they are. This is informal feedback from them, so that wouldn't be subject to any of that kind of documentation. Where formal proposals for improvement or recommendations are made, that's when they fall into those tracking documents.
Okay, I can understand that. Does anyone else have any comments or observations to make? Okay, well, I suggest then that we note the certificate of compliance, and thank you very much for coming to give us that information. Right, the next agenda item is going to be the self-assessment workshop, which many of us attended. The covering note was put together by Mrs. Robson. I don't know whether you want to make some introduction. It's really just, I think, something that the facilitators put together, is it not?
Yes, it is. If members recall the day, WAO colleagues helped us facilitate the day. This document actually tries to record accurately the views of members on the day rather than make any assessment of those comments. So it really is for this information has come back to the committee today for you to decide whether you agree with the record of the day itself and how you want to proceed forward. There are some identified potential actions that you could take in the document attached, and I think it would be good for the committee to decide whether they want to do any of those things or not.
Excuse me, Chair, something's cropped up I've got to go and deal with.
Okay, I understand. Well, we have a set of proposed improvement actions which we could look at, and maybe that will aid our discussion today. The first one we see there is to consider a pre-meeting among members immediately prior to each audit committee, and I think in practice the suggestion is that the committee should actually start its proceedings half an hour earlier, and then it may be possible for members to raise concerns they have about the agenda before the formal meeting starts, and there might be some discussion about that. Yes, Councillor Prosser.
Yes, Chair. I mean, in scrutiny meetings, we do this already, and what it does, it enables the select committee to develop a focus on the line of questioning, so that we don't repeat things over and over again, and that we actually develop a line of questioning to get to a result. So I think it's quite effective. It is beneficial. Sometimes it's not a lot to say because of the agenda is sort of fixed, really, and it's quite obvious what the questions will be. But other times, when there's a large agenda, it does help to focus which items require the deeper scrutiny. And so it could be of use, and I would recommend that we at least try it for the Audit Committee.
Well, I think I would agree, but I think what I would like to suggest is that this half-hour pre-discussion is actually chaired by the Vice Chair. And the reason I'm saying this is because I do tend to get quite a lot of briefing from officers before the meetings begin, so that maybe my views are set, really, by then, and it's possibly be better for a more independent discussion of what's on the agenda to take place. Yes?
Well, with respect, Chair, I think it's vital that the Chair of the meeting is aware of the focus as agreed in the pre-meeting. So I would suggest, no, you should be at the pre-meeting to chair it.
I wasn't...
I'm sure you could maintain your impartiality as a Chair to develop the line.
I wasn't suggesting not attending. I was just thinking maybe I'd just step back a bit from leading the discussion. Yes, Councillor Hayward.
Yes, Chair, the same questions we discussed recently in the Planning Committee as well. And whilst I agree they're good for scrutiny committees, the Planning Committee and the Audit Committee are statutory committees. And the pre-meeting, of course, isn't open to the public, nor is it televised on the screen that the public can review afterwards. And what I'm a bit concerned on is in the statutory committees, planning, licensing, audit, if we have pre-meetings, that we may prejudge or not discuss the issues which might be of interest to the public, and therefore they'll be denied what our views are of the subjects, so that we might not be making the meetings as transparent as they should be to the public in these three instances. So I agree with the scrutiny committees, but for the statutory committees, I'm a bit cautious about having pre-meetings. I think we'd be far better served in having an occasional meeting without an agenda to set our work programme, where we actually decide what we want to take forward and contribute to the work programme.
That's an interesting proposal, but it's a different one than the proposal we have in front of us. I think the driver behind this was just the observation that councillors didn't have an opportunity to discuss the agenda for the committee beforehand in an informal way, and it was just trying to really build something in that would enable people to do that. That no decisions would be made that would not be available to the public. I mean, because nothing that happened in there would be binding on anyone.
And equally, Chair, there would be no officers there if that was the case.
My view was that officers wouldn't be there. Yes. Although I think the secretary has volunteered maybe to provide information, but we wouldn't have finance officers or audit officers there. I don't know. How do we feel about it? Do we still think it's a good idea or not? Councillor Edwards.
I'm going down the same line as Councillor Hayward. We had a pre-meet on the Planning Committee, a bit of something and nothing, quite frankly, because you have these, it's a sub-judice committee to start with, and I think it would be an error, I think, for us. And I think the pre-meet of the Planning Committee, there won't be another one for many months to come. They have not made it obligatory that we have a pre-meet on every planning meeting, and I think it would be a waste of time here as well.
Okay, so I've got 2 clear votes against. Anyone prepared to speak in favour? Not hearing any voices. I think we may not then proceed with this. If someone would like to make a motion at some future meeting that we maybe ought to have a separate planning meeting to decide audit business, we can consider that then. That was the proposal from the back. Okay, so I'm going to put an X against that one.
Chair, before you move on to business, could I answer some of the questions of Councillor Strong? I copied it to Mr. Howcroft. The Monmouthshire Farm Trust would be across 3 pooled funds and could generate between 3.5% per annum.
Thank you.
That was.
Yep. Thank you. Okay. Next one we've got is obtaining greater clarity on roles. The Cabinet member is a member of the Audit Committee. Not quite sure what that's referring to, obtaining greater clarity on roles. The Cabinet member isn't here now. I think it's valid for the Cabinet member to attend the meeting. I think it helps all our business. I don't think there's any serious objection to that. Councillor Prosser.
As a scrutiny champion, I just would like to make a comment. I think this is probably referring to the the terms of reference of scrutiny committees and the terms of reference of an audit committee, and making sure that members of each are aware of the limitations or non-limitations of each committee. I think that's what it might be referring to, because we've had some confusion in the past about, oh, hang on, this is scrutiny, I should be going to the scrutiny committee, and, oh, hang on, no, I want to talk about it here, that sort of role. And I thought perhaps a little bit of extra training might be appropriate in due course. When we do have training throughout the year on scrutiny, and perhaps we should also include training on the role of the audit committee, because people do join and leave various committees, and I think it's appropriate that we make sure they've got their terms of reference right. And so I think that's what that's generally referring to, and what other members think. So I would suggest that we just pass that to the Democratic Services to consider for future training and clarification of roles.
Chair, if I might just come in before that. From memory now, and I might be wrong, I think the question refers to, in the measure, the word scrutinise is used. And yet, and we were saying that we're not a scrutiny committee, it's a statutory committee, and I think we wanted some clarification about what that means, because in scrutiny committees, we're quite clear that there's two sorts of scrutinies. We're the critical friend, and we also develop policy. And we were saying, does this word mean the same way when it's used in the measure to describe the functions of the audit committee?
I will just note at this point that the discussion has quite rightly swiftly moved on to what I believe the next bullet point was, about the terms of reference, about what scrutinising actually means in practice and so on. And I was given some guidance, and we have been given guidance in the past on this. From Robert Tranter, who's legal officer, I guess. And I've got, extracts from things here I can refer to that I think, that we have seen before. The training idea seems good and valid, but I'm not sure how substantial that would be. The relevant paragraph from the statutory guidance about the measure is about 10 lines long. I'm sure we can circulate that around after the meeting about what the role of the audit committee is. I'm not sure there was much more to be decided. I think that pretty much settled it. Yes.
Yes, Chair. Sorry to repeat what I said, but before I came to this meeting today, I've been off the committee for 12 months because I was doing the chairmanship roles. And I asked for a copy of the terms of reference, purely around that particular fact, to get back in my head the limits. And of course, as you say, in our constitution on page 44, it does say what the role of the audit committee is, and it says to review and scrutinise the authority's financial affairs. That's always been the big apple, because people are saying, hang on, we've cut all the financial scrutiny up into each of the relevant portfolios, economy and development, adult, etc. Yet we're asking them to scrutinise it here. So I do feel that some clarity and some training would be beneficial, so that we're all going in the same direction. And we do get better as we update our knowledge week by week. And I think it would be useful just to have an update training session, if you like, or add it on to something else. But I would refer it to officers to arrange that.
Steve?
It's just to come in there, really. I know there's colleagues in the Wales Audit Office of delivering to various audited bodies training on the role of the Audit Committee. So it's just to sort of extend that offer, really, if there's an appetite here to deliver something similar here at Monmouthshire. So.
Chair, I would go along with that if that was feasible and possible.
Well, clearly I'm not going to object in principle to further training. I guess we could also turn it into a seminar, really, about what we think would be appropriate in various circumstances. But if the reference is then to democratic services, is that right, to arrange some training? Yes. Okay. Make a note of that then. Put that in the minutes. Thank you very much. Right. Consider extending the terms of reference of the Audit Committee to allow the committee to invite feedback from other select committees and subsequent scrutiny. I thought the suggestion was that the committee should scrutinise the work of other committees. This would be a big increase in our responsibility. We would probably have to ask for a report from each of the committees and then discuss that report. Do we think that's the way we want to go? Councillor Prosser.
Yes, Chair, I would say this committee, as an audit committee, should be able to inquire wherever it wants to, basically, because if they feel there's a failure of governance or as a weakness in our democratic system somewhere, they should have that power to ask somebody to look at it or look at it themselves. So I would say you can ask anybody in. What I wouldn't encourage, though, is to have a routine feedback from every scrutiny committee, and as you say, you just bury yourself in information. I think it should be on when a major issue raises its head, that you could ask them to feedback and say, well, hang on, we got problems in this area. We want you or your chairman to come to us and give us your version of events or version of policy, whatever it is. So whereas I agree with them being able to come to us and give information, but I'm not in agreement with having it as a routine thing, which would basically give you duplicating it.
I think what worried me was that we haven't, in the last 3 years when I've been chairing the committee, we haven't actually done anything like this, and I wondered, what the mechanism would be that would make us want to do a call-in. So I was suggesting that we do it on a rolling basis, committee by committee. But Councillor Prosser doesn't agree. Any other views?
Chair,
yes.
I think we had a classic example last time. I think you've got to isolate a particular item, which is what we did last time, which was the Chepstow Comprehensive School, where you actually asked the head teacher, who is an employee of the authority, to come here and justify, what's been happening. Individually, that's fine, but I'd hate to think that we're going to have regular reports coming in from the various things. They already do a scrutiny job, and probably very successfully as well. I think we've got to look at maybe their agendas and say, yeah, well, we're not really satisfied. If something happens, or in the minutes, that we're not particularly satisfied with, then there may be justification in calling a particular item in. But I certainly wouldn't be going down the road to every single committee has to be scrutinised by us. I wonder whether the word scrutinise is the right word. Investigate might be a better alternative.
Well, I agree. I thought the committee was working well to call in Chepstow School. I will just leave it open to members of this committee then to make suggestions as to when we want to look more closely at the work of the other scrutiny committees. Councillor Hayward.
Yes, Chair, and I'm thinking on the hoof here. I think that the point that the experience in the audit committee should be wider. We should know what's going on in the scrutiny committees. And I wonder if we take a leaf out of some of the community and town councils around the thing, who their policy committee, which, if you like, is the same function as the audit committee, that it has compulsory members, and that perhaps 4 of the members of this committee should be the chairs of the 4 select committees. And then at least we would have the chairman present at an audit meeting, who would know if a subject had been discussed at their meeting and could report back on it. But I'm a bit wary of being able to call on scrutiny committees, and then another 6 weeks goes past, the committee's got to decide whether to come, who to send, etc. It might just lengthen the process. But if we had if there was a member of every scrutiny committee present at the audit committee, then I think that would make the connection between the scrutiny committees, which is what I think we're looking for. I don't know, I just throw it open.
We could have a standing invitation for them to attend, but I don't think people would necessarily find room in their diaries unless they had a particular reason to be here. Also, I suspect that's what the coordination board is for. So that I can't see setting up another structure there. Yes, Councillor.
Yeah, I think you just said it, Chairman. You've got the coordination board. The scrutiny committees are effectively scrutinising what Cabinet does. And I mean, I wasn't at the last meeting because I was on holiday. But, you can scrutinise whatever the cabinet do, but I think we go in the right way as we are at the moment. If we feel we need it, if we see it necessary to call in someone to explain a particular form of action, if I put it that way, then it's open to us. But as it is at the moment, I don't think we should go into scrutinising scrutiny in that sense. You see the point I'm making? Select committees are scrutinising what cabinet members do. So, you know, we scrutinise overall what the council is doing. So I just leave it there. If we want to call someone in, we can.
Okay, I think that's clear what we'd like to do there. The council should increase communication with the chair so better aware of council-wide matters. I think that's more a personal matter that I, as a lay member, there are probably events going on in the council and outside the council that I don't see and don't necessarily hear about. I just think it's just a plea really to people in general to keep me aware of things, I think.
Yeah, I mean, on that one, I think that the opportunity should be provided to the chairman of this committee to attend meetings if he so wishes. If there's things, any of the meetings of this council, I don't know if you've ever undertaken that particular role, but you know, I think if you want to, I think he should be open to you.
Yeah, can I come in on this one, Chair? The tragedy of this particular building that there isn't a members' room, which we had in the old County Hall in Cwmbran, where members got together, irrespective of parties. We all sat in a large room, had coffee together, and where now we have an independent chairman of the Audit Committee, you would have been very welcome to come in there and do much the same thing. And I think it's this sort of flow of conversation between members and maybe chairman. It would be extremely useful. So I'm sure that Joy can find some money to expand this building. No, seriously, I think this is what's lacking, is this sort of ability to sort of meet people in a very informal basis.
Yes, but I also think there are some issues with systems in that I'm not connected up to the information system that operates in MCC. Basically, communication with me is by email, so it's a push thing that you have to send me things.
Oh, you're not on email?
Yes, no, I'm on email, but I understand there are systems in the council which enable you to access minutes of meetings and agendas and things, and I don't see those.
Except Chair, with respect,
website,
all meeting minutes are on the website, freely accessible to the public, and all streamed meetings go out on the web, so they are there if you would like to. I mean, you can go into our website, look for a particular committee, and see all the past minutes of past meetings, so, and you can also see agendas for future meetings where they've been compiled, so it is there, I think.
You're absolutely right, and I have looked at those from time to time.
Chair, that's easier said than done. Quite frankly, they should add your name to the list. So when they send out agendas, those of us who are not on other committees, we get the agendas of all the other committees. Why not include you as well as chairman of the Audit Committee?
Well, it's a reasonable suggestion, I think. Right, the next suggestion was about producing an annual report. A personal view is that annual is a bit too frequent, but I think occasional reports to Cabinet, I guess, or is it to Council, I'm not sure which, would be a good idea. I think we can probably use this report as a basis for the first one that we do. A concern of mine is how we actually do that in practice, because someone will have to take hold of this document and turn it into something that's would be useful to read and understand how things are going. Yes, Councillor Prosser.
Yes, well, when I was the Chair of Economy and Development, at the end of each session I would sit down with the scrutiny officer and we'd go back through what we'd done during the year, looked at significant issues that were raised, what the actions were and the outcomes, and then we would present that to the last committee of the session, for want of a better word, to see if they were in agreement, and that's one way of doing it. And so you have a summary sheet, for want of a better word. This is what we did during the year. I don't think it needs to be too voluminous. You just need to identify areas of action and significant changes that occurred because of the committee. And I think that can be done towards the end of the session, just by going back through all the minutes and all the actions we did and the people we involved, and generating a summary. I would keep it simple, if is my recommendation, as long as the message gets across and what we've been up to.
Who would be our equivalent to the scrutiny officer? You said you got together with the scrutiny officer?
Yes, as Hazel Eilert is the scrutiny officer that would attend each scrutiny meeting, and she does all the scrutiny committees. In your case, I suppose you could sit down with the Democratic Services officer, and go through the minutes, or you might sit down with one of our internal auditors, Andrew perhaps, or somebody like that, just to say, to go through what you've done. It's just, I think it's the responsibility of the chairman to do a review. I don't think you need to get into big formal AGMs, in my opinion. That's just my opinion.
Well, I think then what I'll do is I'll set up I'll ask for a meeting with Andrew and with Nicola, and we'll see what we can do. Not be concerned about asking questions which could be considered naive. Well, that's just some information, I think. Nothing on 246, 247. Hold occasional private meetings with external auditors. I feel we're already fairly well connected with WAO. Don't know if anyone's got a feel about that.
Chair, I'm a bit nervous about telling the auditor what he's got to audit. It's up to the auditor to decide that. There was a yes in a certain area. But to say that, we'll decide what he's going to audit, but don't audit this, but you can audit that bit, I think that's a bit dangerous.
Yeah, what struck me about this report and the recommendations was that what they were really doing was just repeating back to us some of the things that were said in the meeting. It's not... I don't think the suggestions have necessarily been evaluated in the sense of whether they would work or not work. Yes, Councillor Edwards.
Yeah, would it be possible to consider how the Audit Committee can help shape the programme and work of the external auditor? I think you choose your own way to do things.
Yeah, we absolutely do choose the programme of work, but there was just a discussion at the workshop about, and we never come to an answer. And in terms of how to address this, in terms of what influence the Audit Committee members could have on our work programme. And if we can take it, and in regard to the earlier point about meeting, occasional meetings with the external auditor, this is something I do with another client, a central government body, not, so it's not a local government body. And once a year, there's an hour or half-hour meeting between the Audit Committee members. It's a smaller Audit Committee membership, mind I should add, and myself and other members of the Wales Audit Office, just so you can discuss things confidentially, really, in terms of our programme, how we can help to improve things going forward. Any comments you might have on any other aspects of the Council's business as well, to be honest, in an open and sort of candid sort of manner. But to reflect the Chair's points, though, these aren't our suggestions. These are things that come out from yourselves, really, at this session. So it's up to you now in terms of how you would like to take these forward. So.
Assess the merits of appointing another lay member to the committee. I think the point was made by a councillor that the role of the lay member was altered by also being the chair. So one suggestion, I suppose, was that there should be other lay members, and I just leave that for the council to decide that, I think.
Chair, the Wales message does give the opportunity for 3 lay members.
Sorry, what was that?
opened up the measure for 2011, it does give the opportunity for up to 3 lay members.
The thing I remember is it says up to a third of the committee might be lay members, so it is possible. Might be, yes. 248. Split the agendas into what is statutory, essential business, and what is for noting, etc. Not sure we've got a big problem there. We sometimes do have to ask whether we have to accept the report or just note a report, but I think we usually manage to treat the papers with the proper respect. Then the next one about formalising the decision-making arrangements. I have here the rules of procedure, which I'm quite happy to follow. It also allows me to suspend a lot of the formalities, and since we managed to get through our business in a fairly informal way, I think that is my default position on this. But obviously we can from time to time ask for formal motions if we need them. And the next comment on this, consider whether summary introductory papers should be provided. I thought we settled this in the workshop, that they are provided. There was just a perception among some people, including me, that maybe we weren't always getting summaries. But the internal papers for MCC always have summary papers, and so do the Welsh Audit Office ones. They usually have an introductory step. More detailed training on accounts. I think we do welcome training from time to time. I think we've just discussed training earlier on. Undertake a skills audit on a regular basis. Not sure what that means. I guess if you're going to have training, you need to know what you need training in. And setting up subgroups of committee members. Well, I think we do have that option of setting up a subgroup if we ever needed to. Well, I've been monopolising that quite a bit, but are there any other comments or points that you'd like to make about the report? Well, I think the main conclusion is I'm going to meet with Mr. Watson and the Secretary to consider what kind of report we might want to make to the Council about the work of this committee. Right, well, thank you very much. I'm just wondering whether I need to summarise the conclusions. If I can find page 2. Which I don't have. Right, we decided that we weren't going to have a pre-meeting, I think. We're going to ask Democratic Services if they can provide some training on the aspects of scrutiny and what our proper concerns are. We note that we can call in, well, call is probably too technical a term, but we can invite scrutiny committees to come to us if we have concerns. The chair should be well, the suggestion was that the chair should be copied in on the things that other councillors see, so to keep me aware of the business of the council.
Chair, can I suggest from time to time we get all councillor, it's sent to all councillors. I think that's the list of recipients you could go on, so that whenever all councillors see it, you see it. I think that would be, I don't know, for consideration. What do the others think? Oh yeah, except when there's, it's got to be done in context, where pink papers and things couldn't. I don't know whether they could or not. I leave others decide that. But that's one area you couldn't.
Right, thanks for that. Yeah, I don't think we made any other major decisions or major exceptions to the suggestions that were made, so I'm going to leave it there. Well, thank you very much for that. Next item on the agenda is the Forward Work Programme. Right, yes, next item on the agenda is the Forward Work Programme. Are there any comments on that?
Just can I ask a question? We're talking about the draft accounts. When will we have the final? Will that be the 23rd of September, is it? Sorry, yeah, I can see it on the bottom line now. Thanks.
Okay, so we'll note that. And the date and time of the meeting of the next Audit Committee will be Wednesday the 23rd of September at 2 o'clock. I won't be able to come to that meeting, so I've asked the Vice Chair to chair the meeting. And I'd like to thank you all very much for coming, for facilitating the business of the committee today. Thank you very much.